Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I have the pleasure of welcoming you today in this room, and also all our webcast viewers who are watching us live online to the conference devoted to the presentation of full year results for 2017 of the Grupa Azoty Group. Today's speakers will include Mr. Wojciech Wardacki, President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A. and of Grupa Azoty Police, Mr. Paweł Łapiński, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A., Mrs. Izabela Świderek, Vice President of the Board of Grupa Azoty Puławy, Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki, Vice President of the Board of Grupa Azoty Police, as well as Mr. Artur Kamiński, Vice President of the Board of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn. I will give now the floor over to Ms. President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A. Welcome to the presentation of full year results for FY 2017. Today we have a special occasion because it is an opportunity for us to present the result of all efforts, of all the hard work of our employees throughout the year of 2017, which was a very important year for Grupa Azoty in terms of our consolidation efforts and integration efforts across the group. And I am well positioned right now to give you a declaration which is as follows. The group is now no longer a group of separate entities that have created the group throughout the years. Right now, starting from 2017, we have consolidated a number of activities, and our effects and our results generated in 2017 go to prove that our consolidation efforts have been effective. Today's presentation will include a discussion of certain areas of our strategy. In 2017, we have revised our strategy that had been adopted for 2017-2020, and we also effected its operationalization. And within that updated strategy, we have been effectively delivering those efforts. The main effort consisted in consolidation of the group. This is an ongoing process, but in 2017 we managed to overcome a number of obstacles, a number of problems, and to deliver certain effects, which makes us very optimistic in terms of our outlook for the future as a group, as a consolidated group. To make it possible, we have revived the Azoty Council, which is a collective body of representatives of all the major companies of the group, which discusses and approves all the decisions across the group. We have 3 listed companies within the group, and the 4 main companies that make up the Grupa Azoty Council is now operative. It is now in operation. We started in 2017 and adopted and agreed on certain decisions in terms of consolidation and integration of the agro segment in 2017, which were related to the sales efforts across the group to be handled by one single unit. This process has been in progress. This unit will launch its operations soon, within a number of days to come. And the management boards of 4 major companies and listed companies that are listed on a stock exchange signed a cooperation agreement which sets out a number of collective common measures and efforts to be taken also in terms of the integration of the agro segment. This cooperation resulted in certain changes in the structures of organizational structures in certain companies. For instance, introduction of the corporate department across all 4 major companies, headquartered at Puławy, and the director of this department will oversee the entire operations in terms of our commercial and sales efforts in the agro segment. The management boards will have, therefore, a different capacity, different limited effect due to the institution and creation of this separate unit. This is a major development which was part of our operations, of our consolidation efforts. We also integrated our logistics processes in terms especially of the siding, the railway sidings. We managed to integrate those efforts with Coulter. This is the name of the railway siding company. We will continue to work in that area. We also took a number of efforts to streamline our operations, to consolidate our functions in that particular area, to have a common look, group-wide look on this particular area of our operations. In the revised strategy, we also emphasized that we will be strengthening our position among the leaders of agriculture products across all of Europe. We are aware of the fact that the market is changing, that the expectations are also changing, of our customers are also changing. We are aware that more specialized products are needed. We have taken a number of measures and actions in that particular area. This is where our interest in startups comes from. This is not a newfangled fashion. This is our internal need to make sure that the range of products offered to our farmers is as wide as possible. We are using satellite images. We are developing our products in terms of the fertilizer structures, so as to make sure that the range of products offered to our customers, farmers, is as broad as possible. We are also taking educational measures in that area. You must have noticed a number of problems which were signaled in our publications, in our communications to the market. In terms of our brand, we had a number of different brands, different flags of different companies. We were very determined, and we have been very determined to integrate those efforts, those measures as well. A major thank you is now addressed to Puławy, because Puławy was, as a company, was especially involved in that particular process. For instance, in terms of the T-shirts, in terms of the gadgets financed by Puławy with a common Grupa Azoty Puławy logo on them. This process might not have been noticed in the market, but it has been implemented. From the very beginning, I have been emphasizing our focus on the trust and confidence of our distributors in terms of the area that generates the major share, 50% of our revenue, which is the agro segment. The trust and the confidence is here the key. This is our network of distributors. Our relationships have varied throughout the years, but we were very determined to rebuild their confidence and their trust in us. The most recent meetings with our distributors were devoted to a number of new solutions and a number of new efforts in terms of new contracts. This market is also evolving, and we need to adjust our actions to that evolution as well. This has been appreciated by distributors. We want to have a single contract, group-wide contract, and we will be focusing on the streamlining of the entire product range, which will affect the logistics processes and will drive new savings in transport. It did happen in the past that, for instance, urea from Puławy went to Police and vice versa. This will be streamlined. Those problems will be eliminated. And this is also what we have been doing in 2017. We also focused a lot on our acquisitions, on our interest in acquisitions. We have revised certain acquisition processes or ideas. I cannot really go much into more details in that area, but we will be intent on closing certain acquisitions which will drive more synergies in logistics, for instance. We were also very active in terms of regulations, especially in terms of cadmium. If you look at 2017, at the beginning of that year, you will see that the voting at the European Parliament and the perspective at the beginning of the year was quite different than now. It was assumed that 90% of the votes would be against, would be for very strict regulations. Turned out we lost by 7 votes only, which means that there has been understanding with our partners in the EU. We will also take anti-dumping efforts, so we will try to take over a certain dominant role in that particular area in cooperation with the government. And our cooperation with the government was very successful in 2017, and I do hope that it will continue to be so in the future, in 2018. We have also pointed out in our strategy, and we pinpointed it also as well, during all our presentations and meetings with you, that the group needs strengthening of other operational pillars, not only pillar number 2, but also our non-fertilizer business. 60% of our revenues was driven by the fertilizer segment. In a long-term perspective, it might not be possible. It probably will not be possible to maintain it to be so. We want to flatten, so to speak, and diversify our revenue sources so as to make sure that the economic cycle in fertilizer segment is not affecting us to such an extent in order to manage those risks. I would like to focus on the plastics segment, which will be discussed later on. For instance, polyamide 2 at Tarnów, the unit at Tarnów. And in general, the plastics segment wanted to extinguish a number of plastics products at Tarnów, but we revised our approach in that area, which proved to be a good decision. And looking at the introduction of that particular product through our cooperation with a German company, we can now declare that our efforts have been effective in that area. In terms of polyamides, we will focus on compounding and on more specialized, higher margin products. With a lot of involvement and without major problems, we have been delivering polymer Police, which used to be called PDH before. Based on our analysis, we decided to change the scale of that investment. We will move on into polypropylene, the most complicated product in terms of also the financial dimension, but this project, in accordance with our analysis, is going to be successful, is going to be profitable. And our diversification in that particular area will look a little bit different than we assumed before. Also, if you look at alcohols, at Kędzierzyn, another major decision was to move on to non-phthalic plasticizers. At Kędzierzyn, this is also a major change. In terms of the strengthening of pillar number 2 of our operations, we have a lot more examples, but I will also mention just another one, which is the gasification process. The outlook for that particular project has been successful, has been positive, but we want to focus on the chemical side of that process. In the strategy, we also determine the amount of capital injection into R&D. In terms of innovations and the new R&D center at Tarnów, whose construction was started in Q3 2017, which will be brought on stream next year. You can keep up with that project on the internet. Without R&D, our group as a whole cannot function, so we will focus on our R&D efforts as an inevitable element of the secure operation of our group. We do not want to follow the footsteps of Nokia, a mobile telephone company, which was very successful and lost track with the markets, and as a result losing its market share. Moving on to the concrete results generated in 2017, our performance was very positive. Consolidated revenue at 9.6 billion PLN, which is up 7% year on year. But there's also one element that we need to focus on specifically, the change of our revenue structure. In terms of fertilizers, we have a number of economic cycles. If we look at our major competitors in fertilizers, you will see that the declines, the drops in the business cycle were major. Our situation was much different, but looking at the structure of our revenues, we know that the role of that particular segment was a major role. We did not want to cancel our business in pigments, especially titanium white at Police, and you can also see the margin and the contribution of that particular segment in our results. We streamlined our operations in that particular area, also in terms of the structure of the management. And the experts who, with a number of years of experience in that area, managed to resume those operations successfully. In terms of EBITDA, you need to remember about the one-offs. Those are the elements we did not have any effect on, well beyond our control. In the opinion of experts, those one-offs and the results that were presented did not reflect in the past our actual performance. So you need to remember about that again while comparing our operations from those years back, 2013, 2014, which needed to be adjusted. In 2016-17, the situation was much different. It needed to be adjusted by one-off events. And let me emphasize it once again, we do not have any control over one-offs. Without one-offs, our EBITDA would be higher. We delivered a historically record high EBITDA margin on plastics at 15.6%. And looking at the plastics performance at Tarnów, this is the record-breaking performance in the 21st century at Tarnów. This all makes our position very safe in terms of the debt level, and our consolidation and integration efforts, as well as good relations with financing institutions, makes us on the safe side, and we are sure that we'll be able to finance our new investments. Moving on to Mr. Paweł Łapiński, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A., to discuss our financial performance in more detail. I will not like to reiterate what the President of the Management Board has just said in terms of our performance, in terms of, for instance, revenue, which was up 7%. I would like to focus on EBITDA, which was up around 200 million PLN year on year. Please notice how our performance looks in comparison with our competitors, especially in terms of fertilizers. The European market is based on more or less the same foundations as our group, wrote or fared much worse than our group, with EBITDA falling, while our group reported a positive EBITDA, and this is something that we need to highlight at this point. We also need to highlight our good performance in Q4 with a twofold increase year on year compared with Q4 2016. The businesses that contributed the most to EBITDA and the increase in EBITDA included obviously the plastics at 449 million up year on year, and followed by the chemicals segment at 57 million. But we need to remember about the write-downs and write-offs in that particular segment, amounting to 24 million. Without those write-downs, this contribution would be much higher. And the agro-fertilizers, down 87 million, which was also affected by write-downs. So again, the plastics segment fared very well, with a good contribution from the chemicals segment and a slightly negative contribution by the fertilizers segment. In terms of our capex efforts, the actual capex in 2017 is presented on that slide, slide number 8. Half of it was focused on business growth. Some of the capex we did not deliver in 2017. It will be moved to 2018, which amounts to approximately 160 million PLN. This difference is also driven by better delivery of our budget, which means that our efforts were cheaper than expected. In terms of our geography, in terms of our revenue structure by geography, it remains as it was before, 57% in Poland, 33% in European Union, with a slight contribution only from other continents. In terms of our revenue by segment, our agro-fertilizer segment contributed 52%, with a good contribution from the plastics and chemicals segments. And this is the direction that our group will move on towards by strengthening our business units or by building new business units. This is the direction we will be focusing on, and as you can see, this direction or this strategy is being implemented gradually. Moving on to the discussion of segments, starting with the agro segment and nitrogen fertilizers. As you can see, the margins, the benchmark margins, are still low, so there is no reason to expect a new rebound. Those are the results, the margins presented for 2017. As you probably are well aware of, our 2017 results, there was a heavy bearing from the cost of gas, which were up 20% year on year. A part of those increases in terms of gas prices were transferred to the price of our products to a certain extent. Urea also remains a main driver, a strong driver in terms of the product prices. In terms of the grains balance, both the volumes and the quality went up. However, the relation of PLN versus US dollar did not affect the prices positively for our farmers. Therefore, our farmers did not see any positive price trends in terms of grains. I would like to also mention delayed grants, the payment of grants from the Polish Agricultural Institution. From our perspective, in terms of volumes, they are delivered at very high levels. Considering all the fertilizer products we sold, our sales went up by 4% year on year. I'm talking about the volumes. In terms of our agro segment, our EBITDA was at 484 million and the segment revenue at 5.0 billion. This is a lower level year on year. However, we need to remember about the write-off of our assets, African assets in Senegal. Without that adjustment, we would have a higher EBITDA by 0.5 million, which is a good result for such a difficult year as 2017. In terms of chemicals, the situation is diversified. We have a number of product groups. The pigments segment fared very well, improving its margins by a number of times. Equally good performance was reported for oxo alcohols, with a slightly worse performance for melamine, going down slightly year on year, but still the margin is very attractive. Those margins were driven by the prices of gas. The worst situation was reported for sulfur production. We had two major problems in that particular area. First of all, the currency exchange rates and the prices. I'm talking about here a major weakening of the US dollar versus the PLN, going down by nearly 30% throughout the year. And it obviously had a major bearing on that particular segment. However, please note that there is a high increase, 16% at EBITDA and 14% at the revenue level. So in general, the chemicals segment fared well. And we need to also remember the 24 million write-down related to the installation, the unit, steering unit at Chorzów, and also sulfur production. So this result would be even adjusted, or could be even adjusted by 24 million, which means that the performance of our chemicals segment is very, very positive. And the leader of our increase trends, plastics, as you can see, the benchmark margins went up significantly. The relationship between the plastics and the fertilizers goes to show that diversification is very important for our group. All our businesses have a cyclical nature. So we need to remember about the diversification, which we have been mentioning time and again, because this will make sure that our financial performance is stable group-wide. I would like to mention at this point that this year, in 2018, we might expect a bit of a slowdown in terms of the demand. So far, in quarter number one, prices are still going strong and the demand is still going strong, with a little bit of a difference in terms of phenol and benzene prices. But they will have a delayed effect on the product prices, so we might see it in the future only. As I've mentioned, we delivered a higher EBITDA at 15.6, which is a record-breaking result. 1.6 billion in terms of revenue, 1.4 billion in terms of revenue. And slide number 18, which presents the cost analysis at the group level. 36% are gas prices in general. However, the situation is much different across at all different companies in the group. The situation looks different at Puławy, with the price of gas at 55% in terms of its contribution, much lower at Police and Kędzierzyn. But we need to remember we have other cost drivers here, not only natural gas, but also coal benzene and energy, for instance. A couple of words about the financing structure. As you can see, we have a limit in terms of our corporate facilities, credit facilities. But we do have a credit facility at the European Investment Bank. Our net debt to EBITDA level is very low, which means that we are ready to move on to growth capex investments and acquisitions, and other debt ratios, other liquidity, profitability, and debt ratios are also at very positive, good levels. I'd like to now give the floor over to Mrs. Izabela Świderek, who will discuss the situation at Grupa Azoty Puławy. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to briefly discuss our performance at Grupa Azoty Puławy in 2017. Just as my fellow speakers, I will mention that we have seen a good business cycle, especially in the chemicals segment, which was reflected in our revenue generated in 2017, both in comparison with the previous year and also in comparison with Q4 2016. Both those values were higher in comparison with the previous year. At Grupa Azoty Puławy, our annual performance went up by 4% year-on-year, or nearly 4% year-on-year. But we need to also mention that our increase in revenue was driven mainly by the sales, foreign sales, going up by nearly 150%, with a corresponding slight decrease in sales in Poland, down nearly 9 million. As the President of the Management Board, Mr. Łapiński, has said before, the dependence of Grupa Azoty Puławy on the costs of gas is reflected in our cost structure as well as in our EBITDA. In terms of the costs of consumption of natural gas at Grupa Azoty Puławy, it went up by more than 170 million PLN year-on-year, which is a major increase representing nearly 20%. In terms of EBITDA, the EBITDA generated both in Q4 as well as throughout 2017, our EBITDA went up year-on-year with a noticeable contribution from the chemicals segment. I would like to mention as well at this point that our performance would be better, be it not, or had it not been for the one-off events, especially related to a write-down at Grupa Azoty Chorzów, Zakłady Azotowe Chorzów, which represented nearly 15 million PLN. And we had another write-down of 8.5 million PLN related to a construction of a power plant at Puławy. All those drivers contributed to our net profit. Our net profit is slightly down year-on-year, with a noticeable increase generated in Q4 2017 compared with the previous corresponding period. Thank you very much, and I will move on to the discussion of our EBITDA with an increase of 8% year on year, and this graph shows us the contribution of our segments, individual segments. 2017 was a slightly more challenging year, which had an effect and a bearing on our agro segment. At Puławy, our fertilizers had a negative contribution on EBITDA at down 52 million PLN year on year. This slide will show you the effect and the performance of the chemicals segment, with higher costs affecting both the fertilizer segment and especially the chemical segment. Moving on to the structure of our revenue, we are following suit in terms of a group-wide structure. At Grupa Azoty Puławy, our structure is changing as well. The fertilizer segment, which represented more than 57%, was streamlined, going down slightly. In 2016, the contribution amounted to 62%, which was reflected in the contribution of that particular segment, the chemicals segment, in our revenue at nearly 1.3 billion PLN at the revenue level. Moving on to the fertilizer segment, you will see all those drivers which affected our performance, including both the positive drivers such as rising growing imports and also the negative drivers such as delayed payment of the grants, which resulted in a number of declines across the major product groups offered by Puławy. In terms of our nitrogen fertilizer products, the revenue went down by 1.5%. The same applies to phosphate products, phosphate fertilizers. That decline was higher. Still, our performance, our general overall performance, was in line with the expectations and the assumptions. We need to remember that the prices were lower than expected. The situation looked a little bit different in the chemicals segment. Those results, the performance is better, with uniform increases across all our product groups in the chemicals segment, which drove our performance segment-wide in terms of EBITDA. Both the volumes in the chemicals segment of the sold products and also the prices of our products went up in comparison with what was expected. Moving on to the financing structure at Grupa Azoty Puławy, our ratios are on the positive side. There was a slight decline in our profitability ratios, which was driven by higher dynamics of growing costs in 2017, where in addition to a major increase in the prices of our most important cost driver, which is natural gas, we also had an increase in the benzene prices, which was also reflected in the segment performance at Grupa Azoty Puławy. Please note, however, that our liquidity ratio remains at a high level and a stable level. And need to remember about our investment projects for which we have secure financing. The group finances its operations to a large extent with our own funds, and the debt ratios go to prove so. Moving on to Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki, Vice President of the Board of Grupa Azoty, Zakłady Chemiczne Police. Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by saying that our performance at Police are one of the highest, historically highest results in our history, with a major contribution with the so-called African adventure, which is drawing to its end. And I would like to start my discussion of our financial performance at Police with this particular problem. I would like you to have the broad picture of what has been done so far in that area and what are the financial effects of the so-called African adventure for Police and for the entire group. Because, as you are well aware of, the effects of our investment in Senegal are still visible even today, and we will also have a difficult deconsolidation process ahead of us. There are other institutions who will analyze our investment in Africa. In terms of the business dimension, this investment was ill-prepared and was not based on sound and rational assumptions. The current management board decided in 2017 to take certain measures to verify, correction, 2016-2017, because we recognized first write-offs in 2017, but in general in 2017 we had a technical report prepared by the company under the name of Technip, a globally recognized analyst company, and the data prepared by that company in that report was reliable for the first time ever for a major investment like this. In terms of our simulations based on the results of that data presented by the company Technip, we draw the conclusion that this investment makes no sense and is not economically viable. Therefore, in 2017, we decided to recognize a write-off, which has quite of a bearing not only on the performance of Grupa Azoty Police, but also on a group-wide level. The write-off, representing more than 28 million PLN, was recognized in 2016 and then in 2017. In December 2017, we made an effort to reach a court agreement to have the effects of that investment, of the sale, under control. However, we failed to reach that agreement. We did not reach that agreement. As a result, Afrig, the Senegalese company, the African subsidiary, was no longer able to operate, and the management board of Police decided to discontinue the financing of that particular investment. Let me remind you that all the outlays made on that investment were made by one of the shareholders, namely Zakłady Chemiczne Police. The decision to discontinue the financing put an obligation on the management board president of Afrig SA to file a petition for bankruptcy, and the petition was duly filed with the Senegalese court. As of today, In addition to those outlays, which needed to be made on that investment, amounting to nearly 270 million PLN. In addition to those outlays, we also have potential obligations, liabilities over 70 million PLN, which are related to the demand made by the Senegalese institution or authority for the protection of competition and consumers relating to transfer prices. We have had a number of good contributions from our Senegalese operations in terms of lower prices. However, the Competition and Consumer Protection Authority of Senegal decided that those transfer prices were not applied and were unduly applied in the period until 2015, where phosphate rock was sold to Police. Not to even mention the fact that the price of phosphates was broken down into the actual price with the logistics and also business advisory costs. And even though this maneuver was applied, the strategy was applied, the Senegalese authority still decided that those costs were too low and decided to charge additional taxes. In terms of the cash effect, the cost was more than 270 million, but potentially if we assume all those obligations that I have mentioned, that the effect would be more than 330 million PLN. In terms of our performance at Police, the cash image is to a large extent distorted by this particular investment. Had it not been for that effect, 2017 would be the record-breaking year for our company in the past 15 years. And despite certain signals of a lower business cycle, of a decline in a business cycle, our revenue is still going strong, and also our net profit is much higher year on year. Obviously, the one-offs which are highlighted in that particular slide are merely estimates to a certain extent. It is not reflected in our cash structure to the same extent. Our good performance at Police was contributed obviously by the sales of our fertilizer products going up 6%, and also pigments, especially titanium white. The increase in revenue was at 25%, and looking at the performance of that particular segment, we can see that EBITDA was up nearly 200 million PLN. Therefore, all in all, we can say that to a large extent, our performance at Police, our good performance at Police, was driven by higher sales and also better performance in titanium white. Even though, as I have mentioned before, we're also seeing a certain progress in fertilizers, in our fertilizer business, with only a slight downward trend in compound fertilizers. Obviously, our performance and higher sales was driven naturally by our pro-effective measures in terms of costs, cost optimization, especially fixed costs, were under better control. And also we had lower costs related to the introduction of a program which included optimization of our maintenance shutdowns and also introduction of our sales platform. All those measures delivered measurable effects in terms of both our repairs, maintenance shutdowns and investments, which was reflected directly in the level of costs and by extension in our performance, which in 2017 was up year on year by nearly 90 million PLN in terms of value. Obviously, we did have a number of costs that were absolutely beyond our control. I'm talking about mainly the prices of natural gas, where we saw a dynamic increase in costs, up by more than 30%. And it did not stop, that trend did not stop in 2017, resulting in quite of a nervous or challenging situation also in 2018, especially in the month of March when the prices of gas went up 3 times. Obviously, natural gas is our basic cost driver, not only at Police, but across the group. Other prices or cost drivers went up, especially in terms of potassium salt and also phosphates, but to the smallest extent. Still, we're talking about an increase of around 18%. This was affected and was driven by certain measures taken by the management board at Police, resulting in a multi-annual contract for the supply of phosphates with a largest supplier, SAP. This will stabilize our situation in that particular area, but that does not mean that we have a sole supplier, the only supplier, because phosphate supplies are diversified. We also have phosphate sources with low cadmium content. As you are aware of, there are certain risks in that particular area after the recent decisions and potential decisions of the European Commission. That, I guess, would be it. Thank you very much in terms of our discussion of Police. And last but not least, Mr. Artur Kamiński will discuss the performance at Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to briefly discuss the financial standing and the financial performance at Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn in 2017. I am well positioned to declare that our performance in 2017 was good, with a noticeable trend in terms of a stability, financial stability, especially at the revenue level. Overall, our revenue stood at more than 1.8 billion PLN. I would like you to notice that we reversed or halted a negative trend of falling, declining revenues from sales, which started back in 2013, continued until 2016. We managed to rebound, and our result in 2017 is much better in terms of both in comparison with 2016, but also in comparison with 2015. This was contributed, among other drivers, by our very consistent sales policy at Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn, especially in terms of our OXO alcohol segment, which is a very specific segment in which we can reach our final customers and end customers directly. And we are also deepening and strengthening our cooperation with our distributors in the other segment, in the second major segment of our operations, which is very important for us, especially considering the before mentioned specificity of our fertilizer segment. Practically 100% of an increase in our revenues year on year was driven by the chemical OXO segment. The fertilizer segment year on year stayed more or less flat in terms of our sales revenue, and I will discuss it in more detail in just a second. Moving on to our net profit, operational profit, including depreciation, amortization, which is EBITDA. Our EBITDA before adjustments, which are very minor adjustments, is positive, going up 8 million PLN, which was driven mainly by higher depreciation and amortization figures. Considering that we had a major investment in 2017, therefore depreciation charges went up and our net profit went down. This is the only ratio in terms of our financial performance that actually went down. It went down by 19 million PLN, but we have it all under control, which was driven mainly by lower profitability and lower margins and higher costs of purchase of our basic products, basic raw materials such as propylene and natural gas, which was already discussed by the president of the management board of the group, which is a group-wide effect. We also had a little bit, a slightly higher operational costs and slightly higher depreciation charges. However, if we compare our performance year on year in quarter 4, 2017 versus 2016, all our ratios, especially EBITDA and net profit, went up and are positive, and those results are significantly better year on year. Moving on to discuss another important element, we are mentioning diversification time and again in terms of products and also in terms of financing. I believe that Kędzierzyn is a model example of a half by half, 50-50 diversification. We are striving to create two strong pillars of our operations, that is chemicals, that is fertilizers, and also oxo alcohols, which grows very strongly. And we also remember, we need to remember that we also have a power unit, which contributes to our performance. We have reached a certain stabilization in terms of our OXO operations. We had a small decline, only by 1%, in terms of fertilizers. However, our OXO segment went up significantly, representing an increase of nearly 20%, and we want to, and even though we want to stabilize our performance in the fertilizer segment, we need to remember that our focus is on the OXO segment. We are creating an R&D unit, an R&D center at Kędzierzyn as well. It is one of the pro-growth measures that we are taking, so as to make sure that our costs are also under control. Moving on to discuss our results in more detail by segment, year on year, 2016 versus 2017. As I have mentioned before, in 2017, our fertilizers segment delivered 868 million PLN, which went down versus 2016 slightly, which was driven by the business cycle and the peaks in the business cycle, and also a significant increase in the cost of natural gas, which obviously had a major bearing on our performance. But overall, we had a good stabilization at this level, which makes us very happy. In terms of our OXO business, we had a major increase in terms of our revenues from sales, which grew up to more than 800 million PLN. So in fact, the overall increase in our revenues from sales was driven by our OXO business. In terms of the volumes, sales volumes, we had certain differences year on year. For fertilizers, volumes went down by 2%, which was due to longer maintenance shutdowns at our company, which lasted for nearly 3 weeks. And we also had certain shifts between our products. In OXO alcohols, year on year, we reported an increase in volume by 5%, which was driven mainly by the OXO unit efficiency, which operated at a higher level, and also was related to the replacement of a catalyst, which improved the operational parameters of that particular unit. This is where that 5% growth comes from. If we compare Q4 2017 to 2016, in fertilizers, we reported an increase by 4%, but to be quite honest, this increase was due to a certain shift in terms of our sales figures from Q3. We did have a certain logistics problems in Q3, which related to the transport, the ADR regulations in terms of transport of dangerous hazardous goods. One of our products used to be transported as a safe non-hazardous products. It was, however, included in the ADR regime. We did sell an entire volume, but we needed to have a certain transfer to Q4. So this is where that increase comes from. In terms of our geographical structure, Poland represents 75% of our fertilizers customers and around 25% in the European Union in fertilizers. For OXO alcohols, the other way around, the European Union represents 60% of our customer group. This is our target market, while Poland represents around 25% of our market, and we also have other countries, both European and non-European, in our geographical sales structure. In terms of our financing at Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn, we are on the safe side. We have a stable financing situation. We did have a depreciation charge. We are investing a lot of money, as you can see. In terms of our ratios, our EBIT margin declined slightly year on year in 2017 versus 2016, down from 6.8% to 5.7%, which was related to a lower EBIT figure. EBITDA margin went up slightly as well, and the same applies to the return on capital employed ratios and the return on equity ratio. In terms of our net debt, this is an important signal for you. Our net debt went up, which was due to an increase in investments. We had higher liabilities related to credits and loans, which went up by 34 million PLN, and we had lower cash figures. This is why that increase in our net debt figure needed to be recognized. However, we need to remember that it was also related to the fact that we had a major investment in our CHP plant. Stage number 1 was brought on stream in 2017, which also increased our depreciation charges. Our free financing limits are shown on screen in terms of our corporate credit facilities. the situation is very stable and we have high financing sources, on very secure financing sources. The same applies to overdraft and other facilities. And in terms of our financing structure, we do see the effects of the consolidation and integration measures. And practically speaking, we do have group-wide financing, especially in terms of our corporate credit facilities. In terms of capex, in 2017, we delivered capex at 117.5 million PLN, compared with 75 million PLN in 2016, which was also due to the major investment CHP plant, stage number 1, that was brought on stream. And it was a phased project that lasted throughout those years. Thank you very much. And I would like to briefly discuss one more issue. In 2017, I have mentioned that in 2017, I mentioned that we wanted to have a certain assessment of our consolidation efforts because there have been a number of opinions voiced concerning the big synthesis companies group, which was, and those opinions, and according to those opinions, this group would be operational and would be successful as well. We had certain representatives of our groups, especially Mr. Wiktor Cwyna, who is well known for the analysis of market capitalization and the market companies' values. And we had an analysis and a report in order to determine the measurable effects across the group in our group companies. You have it all in your materials. I would not like to reiterate those figures, but we have mentioned that they were a number of beneficiaries in terms of the purchasing area, especially concerning the contracts for the purchase of gas, especially at Puławy. We were able to streamline the entire maintenance policy, shutdowns policy, repairs policy, so as to make sure that we do not have any interruptions in the supply of our major raw materials. If ammonia is cancelled, if ammonia deliveries are cancelled or stopped at Police, then we were still able to use other sources and deliver good results. And as you can see that we have managed to improve a number of efficiency ratios and implement a number of projects from Puławy and a number of experiences from Puławy to Police to have a synergy effect. When the group was established, we created an entity which generates revenues at more than 10 billion PLN. And we also combined product portfolios, which made it possible for us to gain a major foothold in Europe. In terms of fertilizer production, we are the second largest producer in the European Union. This is a effect of scale, which also has a positive bearing on the financing structure. I do not have to discuss that because this is what you are well aware of. We also had a number of quality measures that we have taken time and again. They are also presented in your materials. I will not need to discuss them right now in more detail, but the effects of the consolidation measures and the integration measures show that we cannot stop now. We need to continue with the consolidation process. The consolidation process will be continued and will reach and encompass a number of functions. We are continuing that strategy. There are a number of functions and processes that are included in the consolidation integration process. including the maintenance, the repairs, the assets, and we are analyzing the potential for new integration efforts. I have mentioned it time and again, but I would also like to reiterate it once again at this point. We are creating a single body to the benefit of the individual subsidiaries of the group and the group as a whole. We will not be putting those efforts on hold. We will moving on towards that path. We want to bring on stream certain projects and have certain acquisitions which should deliver concrete measurable results around 2020-22 at approximately 15 billion PLN. This is a doable, a viable figure based on the analysis of that data, so as to make sure that all the people who doubt in us, that we do have concrete measurable data in hard copy based on which we can make such assumptions. We want to create a well-functioning group and an efficient group with a strong focus in 2018 as well on the spending, to make sure that each PLN is spent efficiently without obviously affecting our quality and our efficiency of our production processes. We will be analyzing our spending. We will be taking efforts in order to cut costs and rationalize costs. And this is of major importance for us and will be in the future as well in 2018. Thank you very much to all of you who are present in this room today, but also to all our webcast viewers who are watching and listening to us live, because this conference was broadcast live. So thank you very much for listening to us and for supporting us with your presence, with your attendance, with your questions, and with your expectations that you also have voiced.